Good afternoon, friends, and we apologize for the late start. One of our speakers has a little trouble logging in, so we're going to be trying to solve this technical glitch in the next few minutes. As I said before, we are at the mercy of the bandwidth here. So it is a great pleasure to welcome you to the penultimate episode in the series of Friday's webinars organized by Modern Greek Studies at Brown. My name is Elsa Manatidou, and I am the director of this deceptively small program, whose stellar cast of faculty includes Yannis Chamilakis, Graham Oliver, Eleni Sikelianos, Johanna Hanning, and Vangelis Calotychos, who will coordinate today's discussion with Gregoris Ioannou, author of the Normalization of Cyprus Partition among Greek Cypriot, and Niyazi Kizilyürek, author and member of the European Parliament, Progressive Party of the Working Left, AKEL, Republic of Cyprus. Niyazi is our guest who is having a little trouble logging in, and hopefully we'll see his face popping up on the screen in the next 5 minutes. Before I hand over to Vangelis, who will introduce our guests, let me thank the wonderful Tiffany Lewis for her efficiency and her patience in pulling off all the practical and logistical details pertaining to this event. And of course, Vangelis Calotychos for his always brilliant ideas, unparalleled collegiality, and the unique intellectual rigor and originality that he brings to our program. During the webinar, I would request that all of you keep your cameras and your mics off, but please feel free to communicate via text, pose questions, make comments throughout the webinar. We are going to pass these questions on to our speakers at various intervals. So again, a warm welcome, kalos ήρθατε, hos geldiniz, to all of you from the UK, from Greece, and of course, from Cyprus and the US. Over to you, Vangelis.
Thank you, Elsa. I'll get right down to it. Suffice to say that none of this would have been possible, not just today, but throughout this year and beyond, without Elsa's wonderful leadership. It's very much the tide that has allowed all our boats to rise during this difficult year. As Elsa mentioned, we're hoping that Niyazi Kizilyürek will be able to overcome some technical difficulties and be joining us in the next few minutes. But I'll begin, and I'll keep my eye out for his entrance. Since its inception in 1960, the Republic of Cyprus has satisfied very few Cypriots. At the time of independence, the majority Greek Cypriots viewed it as a compromise, falling short of their objective, union with Greece. The Turkish Cypriots preferred partition, taksim. Predictably, the Greek Cypriots soon determined the state's constitution unworkable. They bemoaned the Turkish Cypriots' obstructionism, and the Turkish Cypriots in their turn decried the majority's arrogance in seeking the amendment of that constitution. By the end of 1963, intercommunal fighting raged, and there were massacres. The Turkish Cypriots retreated to enclaves on the island as their leadership declared the republic broken and the constitution a dead letter. The Greek Cypriots settled into positions of power. By the mid-60s, Greece and Turkey came close to war. Paramilitaries insinuated themselves into positions of power on both sides. In 1974, with the blessing of an increasingly desperate ruling military junta in Greece, Greek Cypriot paramilitaries staged a coup against the elected government of Cyprus to push for that union with Greece. In response, Turkey invoked its guarantor status to intervene on behalf of its minority and invaded and divided the island into two entities, so occupying 30% of its landmass. As a guarantor, however, Turkey did not meet its obligations by returning affairs to the status quo ante, of which, of course, it did not approve. Under Rauf Denktash, the Turkish Cypriots gradually strategized for statehood. In 1983, however, Denktaş's declaration of a Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus was brushed aside by the international community, with only Turkey recognizing it. The Republic of Cyprus, or the Greek administration of the south of the island, as the Turkish Cypriots regarded it, remained in place, continues to have international recognition, and has at times squeezed the Turkish Cypriots into a corner by embargoes and by other means. And all the while, from 1977 onwards, the terms of a land for peace and reunification negotiation in the form of a bizonal, bicommunal federation spluttered on for years. It ended the careers of many a service diplomat and stymied successive general secretaries of the United Nations. A buffer zone separating the two communities and running across the island, manned by the longest-serving UN peacekeeping force anywhere in the world, remains in place to this day. Indeed, from 1974 to 2003, no movement whatsoever was allowed between the two sides. In 2003, the Turkish Cypriot side removed some barricades and allowed some limited movement across the notorious Green Line. We will be picking up the story there in 2003, and we're joined by two, I hope. I see Niyazi is on the list.
I'm here, Vangelis. Do you hear
Hi,
me?
Niyazi.
Hi, hi.
You've come in just when I was going to invoke your name. Lovely.
Niyazi, can you switch on your video, please, so we can see you? You can do this yourself. Great, thank you. Hosgildin.
Hosgildin.
Niyazi, are you in Cyprus or in Brussels?
Now in Cyprus. Just came back. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, welcome. I'm just introducing the two of you. Gregoris is a child of that period of no movement between 1974 and 2003. Niyazi is a little bit older, like me. I'm pleased to have them with me, academics, authors, and two of Cyprus's most interesting, to my mind, public intellectuals and social activists. Gregoris is a political sociologist and a research fellow at the School of Law at the University of Glasgow. He's taught at the University of Cyprus and holds degrees from the London School of Economics and the University of Warwick in the United Kingdom. His work primarily focuses on labor relations and trade unionism, class conflicts and social movements, contentious politics, and the Southern European crisis. His first monograph is our subject of discussion today, The Normalization of Cyprus's Partition among Greek Cypriots. It was originally published in Greek in a slightly shorter form in 2019, with the πιασάρικο title «Ο Denktash στον Νότο, η κανονικοποίηση της διχοτόμησης στην ελληνοκυπριακή πλευρά», and it's been translated and subsequently published in Turkish in 2020. His co-edited book, Populism and the Radical Left in Europe, was published by Routledge in 2019, while a second monograph entitled Employment, Trade Unionism and Class, the Labor Market in Southern Europe Since the Crisis, is expected to be out from Routledge in summer of 2021. Niyazi Kizilyürek is a professor of political history at the University of Cyprus, specializing on the political history of Turkey and Cyprus. His studies were in sociology, politics, and economics at the University of Bremen, and these studies led to an academic appointment at the University of Cyprus in 1995. Upon his entry there, he was targeted by a number of groups, both political, fascist, nationalist politicians, and the media, and he faced a year-long campaign for his expulsion from the university. Eventually, with the support of his colleagues, he definitively won that struggle, and in 2014, he was elected Dean of the School of Humanities at the University of Cyprus. Niyazi has authored and edited numerous books on the Cyprus dispute, including The Path of a Country in collaboration with the late president of Cyprus, Glafkos Kliridis, and a 2-volume A History of Violence and Resentment, The Genesis and Evolution for the Ethnic Conflict in Cyprus. Since 2019, he has been a member of the European Parliament, representing the left-wing Progressive Party of the Working People, AKEL. He came second among AKEL's candidates in votes, and one of his advocacies in the European Parliament is to promote the Turkish language as an official language of the European Union. In early 1990s, Niyazi produced a documentary called Our Wall, O Tihos Mas, with Panikos Chrysanthou, which later won the Abdi İpekçi Peace Award between the peoples of Greece and Cyprus in 1997. Its first international screening, I'm proud to say, was at the Cyprus and its People Conference, organized by yours truly at Harvard University in 1994, Niyazi, a long time ago. I'm going to begin by focusing a little on that period around 2003 and 2004, which is critical and is a focal point in Gregoris's book. But first, I wanted to ask him, as someone who grew up in that period of no movement and no contact in Cyprus, when he first met Turkish Cypriot, and also what his reaction was, if he can recollect, to the removal of the barricades on the Green Line and those heady days of 2003. Gregoris.
Hello, thanks for the invitation. It's a lovely opportunity to discuss these issues, and which led me also to write this book. Yes, I met Turkish Cypriot for the first time in my life. Must have been late 90s, 1997, if I recall correctly. It was some meetings that were taking place at the buffer zone in Lydra Palace. I was still at school, and there was this effort to bring together some young people from the two communities to discuss and meet and so on. And I remember this. I took part in a couple of these meetings and made some contacts, but then that stopped abruptly as the regime in the north, Rauf Denktaş, basically blocked these meetings. It was a difficult time then. It was nationalism was dominant in both communities, and the political climate was much. It was after the tension between Greece and Turkey, and also the tension in the Green Line in the Rinya, which led to two people dying in the motorcycle protests after 1996. So that was the framework when I first encountered Turkish Cyprus, and that's when I actually started to learn for the first time the other side story of the Cyprus problem. And we continued those meetings. With some of these meetings were continued in Pila, which is a mixed village in the buffer zone because Lydra Palace was blocked. And then again in London when I went for studies. In 2003, I was actually in London when the checkpoints opened. I was following all the developments through the radio and telephones and the internet at that time. And I remember myself eager to go as historic change was taking place in Cyprus. And when I did manage to go after the exams finished and around 1.5 months after the checkpoints opened, I remember I was going almost every day in the northern part of the country and driving around and trying to see the territory, the land that I was prevented from seeing while growing up. And of course, reestablishing my contacts and meeting a lot of new people from then on.
Niyazi, I'm going to ask you the same question. Firstly, when did you first meet a Greek Cypriot? And secondly, I wonder if you could, from the Turkish Cypriot side, explain to us why Rauf Denktash, who had been so intransigent in his quest for maintaining separate entities in Cyprus, why did he allow for the removal of the barricades and the limited opening of contact between the two sides in 2003? So 2 parts to my question.
Vangelis, thank you. What a pleasure to be together again.
Yep.
So first of all, as you know, I was born in a mixed village in Bodemia. My neighbors were all Greek Cypriots, but of course, I as you said, we are a bit elder than Gregoris. So in '64, I became a refugee and I left the village I was born. So I had no idea that my neighbors were all Greek Cypriots and my parents enjoyed great relationship with our neighbors. But in my ghetto years, which I spent from '64 to '74 in Lurigina ghetto, it is between Nicosia and Larnaca, now at the Turkish side or occupied area. When we were allowed to come out the ghetto, a kind of normalization has started end of '60s, like '69 and '70. And my grandparents returned back to the village, our original village, Bodemia. And when I started visiting them, I was meeting many, of course, Greek Cypriots. And I understood that Greek Cypriots were not what I was taught at the school, because I grew up in a Turkish ghetto with a lot of nationalist education, similar to Greek Cypriot education system, of course. Also, Vangelis, Gregoris mentioned his book. So when I first saw Greek Cypriot, I understood these Greek Cypriots are not what I'm taught in the school. We are not Türkenfresser. No, we are not there to kill Turks as we used to taught. And then my family developed like a common enterprise with some Greek Cypriots. And I had a great friendship with these people. So before '74, I already, my stereotype about Greek Cypriot I had from the school was broken. I had good relations to Greek Cypriots. I understood that there are, as we said, good and bad Greeks. So all Greeks are not the same as Denktash's education system was telling us. Now, after '74, my first meeting with Greek Cypriots was abroad. It was in Germany at Bremen, at University of Bremen, when I went there to study after '77. So it was never a kind of surprise to me to meet a Greek Cypriot or to communicate with a Greek Cypriot. That was part of my country, my homeland. So I normalized this and internalized it deeply, almost as a young child. So now, if I come about Denktash's insistence for the partition of the island, we should say several things there. Definitely, we can talk about the influence of Turkish nationalism. Rauf Denktash was a pan-Turkist. Ideologically, he wanted to be part of Turkish nation. But behind this, there is also some deep fears by Denktash about the domination of the Turkish Cypriots by Greek Cypriots. So his fear though was that coexistence with Greek Cypriots, with any constitution, if you like, would lead to a domination at the end, even to elimination of this Turkish Cypriot community. So he had a fear, deep fear actually, and that made him an aggressive nationalist. Third level, of course, is the dynamics of modernity in Cyprus. Turkish Cypriots are not numerically only less than Greek Cypriots, but they were also less modernized. I mean, we did not have a strong bourgeois class. They were not industrialized. They could not compete with Greek Cypriots. So sociologically, he sought the solution in separation, which is a tendency always, a kind of nationalism of separation. We see it when someone cannot really coexist in a space. Others are more stronger, economically more stronger, population-wise, and plus that big community, in this case Greek Cypriots, are not seeking for independence. They don't have a Cypriot consciousness, but they have a Hellenic consciousness, and they do identify with Greece, and they want to unite with Greece. By that, you come into the traumas of Greco-Turkish warfare, Megali Idea, Turkish-Greek warfare of 1922, etc. So all this together, and I would say also in a way, by some encouragement by British diplomacy of divide and rule, the colonial policies, produced this idea that Turkish Cypriots can be protected only if the island is divided.
So why did he agree in 2003 to bring down the barricades and
Well, I think that is one of the historical turning points, as rightly Gregoris in his book find out. I mean, 2003, it's the greatest rebellion against Denktash and Denktashism from Turkish Cypriots. That is this not happened in one day. It was within the period of Annan Plan. We were discussing the comprehensive settlement of Cyprus conflict, and we were talking about the accession of Cyprus as a whole to the EU, and Turkish Cypriots were strongly motivated to come out of this big ghetto of northern Cyprus created in 1974. So that challenge and this rebellion against South Denktash did not leave any option. Actually, that was also not his idea. In a way, that was Ankara's decision, to allow somehow to take the steam of the pressure, because Turkish Cypriots they were probably ready to override all barricades in a way at that point. So he did it without really wanting it. He was obliged to do it. It was a kind of achievement of Turkish Cypriot rebellion. Unfortunately, this is there that something really unique came out. First of all, no one was expecting Denktash would be defeated by Turkish Cypriots, among Greek Cypriots. And it is there that actually Gregoris starts essentially his analysis of his book, because until then, you heard in Greek Cypriot sides always this slogan, Ano Denktash de fevgi, de yine τίποτα στο Κυπριακό. If Denktash doesn't go away, there is no solution in Cyprus conflict. And the moment Denktash was about to go away, suddenly Greek Cypriots get confused. I remember the Bishop of Paphos, and now Archbishop of the Orthodox Church, saying that he was praying that Denktash is in good health because he was hoping to protect Greek Cypriots from the Annan Plan by saying no to this plan, as he was famous for being Mr. No. So Greek Cypriots actually were hoping that Denktash remains in power, and that upsets the whole perception of a Cyprus conflict. And actually, I think there comes also Gregoris' book's title. That was like, well, Denktash in the north somehow is gone, but somewhere there is a Denktashism within the Greek Cypriot community. And that, we experienced this in 2003, 2004. In that sense, is a very crucial period. Of course, it remains to be debated with Gregoris, because he states that it was a conscience choice of Greek Cypriots partition. I wouldn't go so far, but definitely there was a confusion, there was contingency, there was a leader like Tasos Papadopoulos who never believed in coexistence on the basis of equality of two communities. There was an AKEL which was behind Tasos Papadopoulos, great historical mistake, I would say. So at that point, we were not sure if Greek Cypriots were really deliberately going for a permanent partition. I think the permanent... I finished my last word. Permanent partition grow up systematically after 2-3 up until today.
Yeah. Can I to Grigori, because Niyazi certainly touched on the reasons that the Turkish Cypriots had benefits to gain from pursuing the Annan plan. The Annan plan had begun to be discussed, and it wasn't the first such plan to be on the table in the past. But in your book, tracing its development from 2002 onwards, you really focus on it as pivotal for understanding the Greek Cypriot consciousness around the issue of partition. Could you sketch for us what were the aspects of the plan that provoked a reckoning and a confrontation among Greek Cypriots with their beliefs around partition?
Yes, I think it was pivotal because, first of all, it was the first comprehensive plan, and more specifically, it was the first peace plan that was actually taken down to the people, and the people had to take a position on it, even in the reductive terms of a yes or no vote. This on its own created, sociologically speaking, a sort of the people became inevitably part of the Cyprus resolution process. So I think this is what makes it, and this allows us as analysts to actually see deeper structures that were there from before, and as Niyazi very succinctly put it, they are actually developing up to this day. But it allowed us at that moment in time, because of the public discussion, to actually see those developments. In my analysis, I see crucial as the political equality dimension, whereby an unplanned and bizonal, bi-communal federation model reminded Greek Cypriots that actually a solution would not be just taking over the northern territory, as that was the myth through which the education system was more or less operating, but that it will bring back a sort of balance that existed already in the 1960 constitution, that they had to share power in all levels. And this this provoked a shock to many Greek Cypriots. I'm trying to not be absolute in my formulations. I do say in my book that there was a conscious decision by the Greek Cypriot, by the big section of the Greek Cypriot elite, and by the big section of the Greek Cypriot electorate at that moment. But I'm not saying that there was a decision there and then that the Cyprus question is going to be resolved via partition. That happened later. But it was conscious, there was the element of material interest and very cynical calculation. So what I'm arguing is that we need to see beyond the slogans and beyond the emotional aspects and the politics of trauma and nationalism and so on. All these are important, of course, and they created the framework through which the political position was expressed. But there was also very crude material interests involved in determining the stance of the of the Greek Cypriot community and its leaders. And I argue that we were able to see those material interests as they developed in the next decades to actually see what is happening today.
Okay, let's hold on to those material interests. I just wanted to ask you, in terms of the aftermath of that referendum, where, of course, 76% of Greek Cypriots voted against the plan, and 64%, I think, of Turkish Cypriots voted for the plan. My own feeling about it was that you mentioned slogans and sloganeering, that in some ways the slogans that had limited discussion and thinking on the one hand around the Cyprus issue had been challenged. That is, I mean, I was talking to you this morning about how within my own family for the first time, I heard people actually exploring what a solution would look like and what compromise would look like during this discussion around the referendum. So that was uncovered. The possibilities for that was uncovered. At the same time, it seemed to me that there was a tremendous disillusionment among the left and among people working for unification immediately after 2004. So I wonder how we move from 2004 forward in the period immediately following the rejection of the referendum. Gregoris.
Yes, the period. There was a hardcore position of extreme, the hardcore of no vote, as I call it in my book, that there is people who have decided that they will never accept any sort of compromise and any sort of power sharing in Cyprus, irrespective of what the actual provisions are. And even if that will lead inevitably into a partition, a formalization of partition, I think that element came out. Is emis poda chinipoji. So us on one side, them on the other side. This position was a taboo. It wasn't articulated in public. I think the Annan plan brought this out because people, not formal, not like openly in the media, but it was people were relaxed enough to say it in gatherings and family meetings and so on. It came out. It became an issue that could be spoken out. About the point you mentioned, the thinking of the future. Well, I think that was not developed enough. It was a Turkish Cypriot community that public dialogue and the vision for the united Cyprus future was articulated. In the Greek Cypriot community, these discussions began but were muted because what dominated was the refusal to think through. And discuss about the prospects of the future. It was like a defense reaction to stick to the past. And to argue and to have the arguments about the Annan plan in terms of the past and the present rather than the future. And the second thing, I think there is what I call the normalization of partition is when people are not willing to see beyond what exists. So seeing the prospect of an Annan plan as a sort of disruption rather than an opening, as a risk rather than as an opportunity.
Niyazi, what was how would you describe the aftermath of the Annan plan among the Turkish Cypriots? What kind of momentum was there post-2004 for the years immediately after that?
It was a great disappointment, Vangelis. was a great disappointment, especially among the left-wingers who were trying to convince Turkish Cypriots for coexistence with Greek Cypriots, who were fighting against Denktash so many years and against partition, trying to convince people that coexistence is possible, Greek Cypriots are not the enemy. And at the point, we came to a high point, really, we came to a point really to overturn Denktash and seeing the perspective, suddenly, and I'm saying here suddenly because we have to look into this, what's happened really in 2004. We had a strong ohi from Greek Cypriots, okay. But especially the position of AKEL was a big disappointment among Greek Cypriot left-wingers.
As the Communist Party of Cyprus, AKEL, Communist Party of Cyprus.
I believe that normalization of partition begins also in the minds of Turkish Cypriot left-wingers after 2004, in a sense, because they were so deeply disappointed. They could not see any hope. Cyprus joined the EU and they were left out, actually. They got stuck in the ghetto. Dependency on Turkey more and more still is growing today. So it was a historical moment of disappointments. And if you want, in a way, Turkish Cypriot left-wingers and Democrats and peace lovers, they lost the hope that we can achieve something together with Greek Cypriots. So that was a historical disappointment.
Yeah, so can you explain to us, both of you, how did we manage then within 4 years or so to enter into negotiations at the bicommunal level led by the Communist Party on the Greek Cypriot side and a more open and responsive politician, Mehmet Ali Talat, on the Turkish Cypriot side? How did that come about, given the disappointments? Grigori, why don't you go first and then Niyazi?
Yes, I think there was a process of change. AKEL had its biggest electoral defeat in the European elections just a few months after the referendum. So many tens of thousands of AKEL voters deserted the party, and there was not to go to other parties, but basically distancing themselves, and this started a process. It was a slow process that went on for a decade, whereby, without admitting it, AKEL judging from also the personnel that rose up in the party office, that there needs to be a second chance, a second attempt to have a compromise solution. So this takes shape when AKEL breaks with Papadopoulos in 2007, already 3 years later, and with Dimitris Christofias as president. There is the scope and the hope for a new beginning. And actually, a lot of progress was achieved in those negotiations. Cross-voting, for example, the agreement on cross-voting, rotating presidency, and so on. This on the power-sharing dimension.
So cross-voting would mean that Greek Cypriots had the opportunity to have a say in part on Turkish Cypriot leadership.
Exactly, and vice versa. So rather than having totally separate elections, having a sort of a formula through which one community would have 20% impact in the political process of the other community. So this was a formula that was agreed back then. But at the same time, AKEL was not ready, or Christofias was not ready to put this in writing, to actually have this sealed as an interim agreement on which the negotiations would make this. I mean, there was the political dynamics.
Why is that? It seems that Greek Cypriots at critical moments have trouble putting things in writing.
Yes, there was the key thing was that his coalition, AKEL's partners in government were opposed to that. VC was not seen as reliable enough. AKEL was afraid to take the step, because to do that you need to be bold enough to face nationalism and which is strong in the Greek Cypriot community. And this, when AKEL attempted, for example, to do a reform of the educational system, it was blocked. It was blocked by all parties, including VC, at that moment in time. And this showed power correlations at that moment. So yes, the short answer is that AKEL was not bold enough or ready enough to confront nationalism at the level of confrontation that was necessary at that particular historical time.
Right. Niyazi, you have something to add on that period and the negotiations under AKEL's leadership?
Well, I mean, let us go a bit, make a zoom. We had a strong no to Annan plan. What happened after that was even worse. It was a demonization of Annan plan. Was even worse after the refusal. So I think Annan plan created such a mental blockage among Greek Cypriot elites that a strong Oki created such a strong blockage which did not allow to communist Christofias, but also to pragmatic right-winger Anastasiadis to move until to end in negotiations. I believe, although we made progress in 2 years between Talat and Christofias, and also Akıncı Anastasiadis, at some point, that first time between 2008 and 10, and second period was like 15 to 17, Anastasiadis Akıncı. But still, what the atmosphere created in 2004, the Annan plan was demonized. It wouldn't allow to any of the leaders to make the biggest step or to run the last mile, as Gregoris puts it. So we are entangled by 2004. That spirit is still following Greek Cypriot elite. Of course, there was progress among between Talat and Christofias, but what we were expected from them was not the progress, was the comprehensive settlement. And because I followed closely the negotiations between these leaders, that was not easy at all. I mean, there was progress, but it was really going very slowly. A lot of hard work, a lot of energy was invested to make some steps, but it was not the kind of now an atmosphere of reconciliation. You know, it didn't create an atmosphere really to bring two communities together more than the other times. So I think 2004 was a turning point in Greek Cypriot politics in the sense that no one dared afterwards really to make big steps within the realm of Annan plan or within the realm of federalism or bluntly put by power sharing. Now, it is really to look more into this, because in 2004, still I believe it was a kind of coincidence which mixed with these structures. And I will explain what I mean. I mean, we had Tassos Papadopoulos in power in 2004. If we had Yorgos Vasiliou or Glavkos Kyrillis, probably things could have been different. But what's happened really in 2004, even AKEL was so hesitant to vote yes or no until very last moment, AKEL could vote yes to Annan plan. It was really at very last moment that AKEL changed its opinion. So it was not such a kind of structure we came and tell we do vote against. It was a kind of contingence and coincidence. But after that, refusing of Annan Plan or refusing a kind of bi-communal, bi-zonal federation became more and more dogmatic. And it was a very, very, very bizarre in that sense. You had AKEL who was very close to vote, yes, and that AKEL won the elections and Christofias became president. And then you had Anastasiadis who voted yes, who became president. So actually two political figures, one can say, open to a federal settlement. So it is very interesting that you have this kind of leaders who came to power by after 2004, but with 2004 spirit doesn't let them to move ahead. Yeah. That's the paradox of the whole thing here. And of course, here I think comes what Gregoris rightly analyzed in his book: holy structure, education system, media, political culture, perception of Turkish Cypriots by the Greek Cypriots. You know, of course, that is the structure, of course, which doesn't change in a day. But it's still, to my mind, it still is a mysterious question. After such a strong no vote, how come that Christofias has been elected? How come that Anastasiadis, first period, has been elected, knowing that both were much more open towards a settlement?
Let me jump for a second, and I wanted to direct Grigori to what I find a very fascinating part of the book, which is he considers a little bit the crux of the decision, again, not to put something on paper or to agree to something that seemed to be reaching a solution in many of its dimensions in the negotiations between 2015 and 2017. But Grigori in his book doesn't focus on the individual politician, which is interesting in his way, because the president of the Greek Cypriots, Anastasiadis, is of course the same individual who in 2004 was a right-wing politician agreeing to the Annan Plan, who in 2017 is criticized for objecting to many of the things that had been negotiated and agreed upon at the meeting. Now, what I find particularly original in Grigoris' exposition is that he doesn't discuss, or you don't discuss, Grigori Anastasiadis' reflexes and perhaps his drift towards a partition solution in our, in the latest period, by referring to his own ideas, but by presenting them as a natural consequence of some of the social and economic problems among the Greek Cypriots from 1912 onwards, financial crisis, etc. I wonder if you could develop that for us, because I think it's quite an original position.
I must say that I don't do that about Tasos Papadopoulos either. So I'm not disputing the role of leadership in history and the agency of both Tasos Papadopoulos and Nikos Anastasiadis in the direction that Cyprus problem has taken in the referendum and in the collapse of the Crans Montana and negotiations and onwards. But I try to see this, trying to see the broader forces, social and economic forces who are being, and political and ideological, of course, that are being expressed, manipulated as well, but also expressed by the leaders themselves, that the leaders cannot take decisions as individuals or as a small group of leaders thinking, but that these people who take the decisions and act have in mind and are themselves expression of broader economic interests, social dynamics, and so on. And the analysis that I do, what has changed is that a lot of things are the same. in 2004 and 2017, but there are also some things different. What is the same? The same is that we have the majority of the business world opposed to a compromise, the majority of the Greek Cypriot business world. We can also go and find the names of the prominent businessmen in Cyprus and how they funded the No campaign back then in 2004, and how they refused, even those who were like less vocal, who refused to take a stance in supporting the solution. And more so, and this has happened, I argue, more in the current, in 2016, 2017, because of the specific results, the specific consequences of the economic crisis. And what are these? First is the parasitic relationship between the Greek Cypriot business world and the state. This has been a diachronic feature, but because of the crisis conditions, has expanded further. And this can be seen in various terms: corruption, clientelism, conflict of interest, and this interaction between politicians and bankers and big business and so on. So this parasitic relationship was seen, and beneficial relationship to the economic elites of Cyprus was seen as to be threatened by the prospect of a new settlement that will bring in the Turkish Cypriot community and the interests of Turkish Cypriot business and other people into the governing of the state. The passport selling business that was established and in which Anastasiadis himself and his circle, the circle of lawyers and accountants and developers, have been is one part of something bigger. The second point is the austerity context that prevailed after the years of the crisis and the financial collapse. And I argue that this has brought a new sort of reality in labor, in the labor market and in employment relations, bringing wages down, increasing the relative power of business, and also facilitating this enhanced political role of the business world in terms of the policy of the state on a series of levels. For example, how to handle the banks, how to handle how to operate trade, and so on. And all this, and wages themselves, civil service reform, and so on. All this there was a danger to be reopened up as the new state of affairs was going to come to place. And this can be seen in the discourse of the cost of the solution. We had this in 2004, but that was different. That was welfare chauvinism. That was Greek Cypriots are doing better in economic terms, and they don't need to pay for the Turkish Cypriot. Whereas here in 2015-16, the economic distance between the two communities has actually shrunk. But there was a question of reopening up to have a new social contract to actually staff the state. You need people to staff the new state and to open up the labor market and the economy that was going to be united and so on. And the third reason, the third factor that I argue was different has to do with the Turkish Cypriot community, whereby Niyazi mentioned it before. The influence of Turkey in the northern part of Cyprus has grown immensely during this 15-year period, both in terms of capital and investment and in terms of people, migrant labor and so on. So some sections, at least, of the Greek Cypriot business world, I argue that they were afraid of the competition with Turkish capital, and their plan they were afraid that the Turkish capital was going to block them out from the development of the new united economy, at least the northern part. So they could see limited profit coming out of the solution, and more risk than benefit.
Let me scoop one of the questions from the chat and broaden it a little bit. What do you see as the status of kind of civil discourse and opinion around Cypriot identity in the two communities in the last 10 years? And I would also say whether there's any relationship between that kind of issue with the protests that are unfolding and the kind of, you mentioned corruption, some of the attacks on the establishment that have been taking form in the last few months in the southern part of Cyprus. I mean, the question about Cypriotism, Cypriot identity, and whether in fact there are signs of a change in civil society, civil discourse in the last few years. Either one of you could.
Shall I? I think Cypriotism is on the rise, has been on the rise steadily for decades. The question is, to what extent is Cypriotism, can Cypriotism be expansive enough and political enough? I mean, expansive enough in terms of really including in its imaginary and its framework and its orientation, the Turkish Cypriot community, and on what terms, and political enough, whether this Cypriotism, this Cypriot-centric identity would be expressed not just in the language and in the contestation of nationalism, but also more actively in support of a federal structure in Cyprus.
Niyazi, before I ask you the same question, you mentioned that Turkey has more influence in the north than it has. I wanted also to add one of our old students, Alyosha Bilenberg, refers to the influence of Erdogan. I remind everyone that the period in 2002 and 2004, when the Turkish Cypriots were pressurizing Denktash, was the first period of Erdogan, when he was courting the Europeans and the European Union. Now there's a very different Erdogan in his contacts with the leadership in the north of Cyprus. I'm wondering if you could address the issue of Cypriot identity and how it is affected by Turkey's position and Erdogan's play. Something that Gregoris discusses in the book as well. But Niyazi.
Well, definitely after 74. I mean, 74 is a historical breakdown and turning point in regard to debate about Cypriotism, etc. Okay, but there are many different Cypriotisms, but yet not a political movement. For the Turkish Cypriot community, it's to identify with Cyprus as a homeland more and more is a combat against Turkey's domination. That has been always, after 74, I mean, all right? Now, this struggle with Turkey's presence in Cyprus had different shapes and motives during the years. After 74, of course, we were with troops, was the Kemalist establishment, some of the population. Now, last 15 years, as mentioned before by Gregoris, we have an AKP government of Erdogan, which turns with North Cyprus more and more into a hinterland of AKP. It's not on capital. The capital is coming from Turkey, population, settlers, demographic change. But even maybe more important is the cultural war, Kulturkampf, which AKP is fighting. This Kulturkampf, cultural war, is going on in Turkey against the secular sections of society and elites, but also very similar now, we have it also in northern part of Cyprus. Now, it is exactly at that level that Turkish Cypriots are becoming more Cypriot, culturally more Cypriot, in order to defend a kind of identity which they consider Turkish Cypriot, Cypriot, more Cypriot, less Turkish Cypriot, whatever it is. But that even comes to a point to turn into a kind of supremacy of Cypriotness even. So they're trying to present themselves as proud Turkish Cypriots against a kind of Turkish nationalist slogan. We were saying, what a proud to say I am a Turk. Now, actually, we are heading towards a direction saying, what a proud to say that you are a Turkish Cypriot. So this is a combat, it's a struggle. It's a struggle against Turkey's attempts to dominate also culturally the Turkish Cypriots. If you only consider that what's happened last night, then a premiere of a film prepared by Turkish state television for Cyprus, it was a gala premiere last night, and many Turkish Cypriots immediately protested this kind of perception of Cyprus from Turkey, you know. Turkish Cypriots, yes, they do feel more Cypriot, but that's a cultural dimension, maybe also a defensive. They defend maybe some elements of their identities they believe is under the threat, but as a political program, there is no Cypriotism. Now, the same goes for the Greek Cypriots. After 1974, again, of course, Greek Cypriots, they started to give, of course, they definitely give up the idea of unification with Greece. So the emphasis as a political movement was over, but it has been replaced by a neo-nationalism, a state-centric nationalism, that Greek Cypriots were running alone with the Republic of Cyprus. That state-centric Greek Cypriot nationalism, to my mind, also represents people such as Dacis Papadopoulos, who on the one hand, we are against Anampa land, but on the other hand, of course, they never want to join Greece. That kind of Cypriotism, of course, is a kind of new nationalism. Now, in recent years, we have a different Cypriotism also, which considers Cyprus as a common homeland with Greek and Turkish Cypriots. Latest protest social movements actually shows us this very clearly in Cyprus. Movements such as Osedo, for example, that is going on against corruption, etc. If you see the cultural elements of these movements, the language we are using, etc., definitely there is a strong Cypriotism there. That Cypriotism is something from below which turns against the Greek Cypriot elites. Now, we can finish by saying Turkish Cypriots are getting Cypriot in many, maybe confused way, but basically they are fighting against Turkey by expressing their Cypriotism. And new movements of Greek Cypriots is rather turning against Greek Cypriot elites. This is that kind of Cypriotism. So I find it very interesting what's going on recently here.
Let me again bring together two questions in the chat. One is the idea that any kind of solution to the Cyprus issue needs to take place in the broader context of resolutions to issues in the Eastern Mediterranean. And I bring up two aspects of this. One the gas reserves, and whether the discovery of gas reserves in the region, which was presented as a game changer, is being handled in such a way as to make a solution even more difficult by excluding the Turkish Cypriots and Turkey, And allied to this, something that's discussed in Gregoris' book, the connected relationship of Cyprus to Israel. I wonder if you had comments on these points. The status of the gas reserves, the financialization of that issue, and of course the relation with Israel, etc.
Yes, I'll briefly comment on that. Before, though, I want to agree with what Niyazi said, because I'm also part of these mobilizations, Ozdame and Enough, in the south of Cyprus, which the term south of Cyprus has become a major point of the hysteria this week. And he's absolutely right that it is a movement that is directed against the Greek Cypriot elite, and using Cypriotist language and Cypriotist symbols and slogans and ideas, saying that the status quo, the existing state of affairs, is unacceptable. And this and the more crucial contribution of this movement is making the connection between corruption and capture of the state by what I called before this parasitic business model that is in place, and clientelism and so on. All these questions, connecting them and seeing the connection between this and the continued division of Cyprus and the continued monopolization of the republic by the Greek Cypriot community, and the non-functioning of the constitution of the republic with its checks and balances, and instead running the republic on a sort of suspended bicommunal constitution and the doctrine of necessity and so on. Now, about Erdogan's influence, I also want to make a comment. It has the recent authoritarian turn of Erdogan's government in Turkey has cast its shadow on the Greek Cypriot community as well, and it has strengthened those in the Greek Cypriot community who are opposed to compromise and to reunification, and they bring this as an example, because the fear of Turkey by Greek Cypriots, the trauma of the 1974 war is there, and it's a fact. It was an important point why Greek Cypriot rejected the Annan plan in 2004. So Erdogan is now seen as embodying this threat in an even more threatening way, an even more ugly way than was the case with the previous traditional leadership of Turkey. About the alliance with Israel and the question of the gas reserves, yes, I think that this has complicated further the negotiations of the for a reunification of Cyprus, because it has effectively shifted the interest. I mean, the international players are really the main motive behind supporting this peace process is so that it opens up the way for finding balances in the region and having some sort of control, some sort of not allowing the region to tensions in the region to escalate. Whereas the Greek Cypriot leadership is trying to use, and has been using before Turkey blocked it, has been using the natural gas issue as a sort of weapon against Turkey. So trying to use these hydrocarbons as a card in the negotiating table, which in my reading has always been a naive position, because you cannot pretend to be stronger than you are, and this idea of strength to actually materialize on the ground.
Elsa?
Yes, I think that because we started late, we carried on a little longer, but people are here, people have questions. So it's up to our speakers if they'd like to stay a little more to answer some of those questions, or if you have better places to be.
No, I can stay another 15 minutes, I can say.
Okay, Vangelis, I know you have to teach. Do you want me to pass on the questions? Will you stay?
I'll try and hang on here. I'll try.
All right. Okay, so take it away. I think perhaps in the interest of time, we can ask people to unmute and ask the questions themselves.
Sure.
Okay, so Konstantina, I think you had a question. So if you're still there.
I'm here. Hi,
Okay.
hello, friends.
Yeah.
So thank you, Vangelis, for organizing this, and Elsa, of course. I just thanked Vangelis because he knows very much the political situation in Cyprus. So it's really very brave that he has invited these two people. I didn't really have a question, although a question was born in the meantime. But my addition to all this is that since we are in the US, I wanted to transfer somehow the feeling I get from the people, the Greeks, the Greek American community, the people I meet here who have been talking and thinking of the Cyprus problem through this very crucial figure of Michalis Ignatiou, who is the major correspondent of Cypriot media in New York all these years. And so there is a huge demonization of the Annan plan, even bigger than what I've met in Cyprus. This is one thing to keep in mind. It's not really a question. I was shocked by what I have heard around here. But one thing that I wanted to ask the speakers to comment on is whether they have any sort of criticism against the forms of Cypriotism that emerge as alternative to Greek or Turkish nationalisms, and whether you think that we need a third nationalism in order to exist as a federation in Cyprus. Thank you.
So over to you, gentlemen.
Shall I go first? I think there's something I didn't answer before very briefly. There was a question on regional, whether Cyprus solution is possible without a greater solution to the divisions in the area. I think the answer is yes. And I think the answer is there must be, because the conflict between Greece and Turkey is much bigger. The scope of it is much wider. And I think that if we treat Cyprus as part of the whole Greece-Turkey relations, it's going to block, and it has been used for many decades as a way to not discuss, as an excuse for Greece and Turkey to not discuss, Greece primarily, but both of them in a way to not discuss their whole the whole spectrum of the issues of their relation. So I think that it is possible that that an agreement happens in Cyprus about Cyprus, and that agreement could also open up then subsequently a framework for the solution of the other problems in the region. Konstantina's question is really big to answer, but I'll try. I don't think Cypriotism has the capacity at this moment in time, at least, to become a third type of nationalism. It is a sort of a nationalism, a sort of civic identity, a more sort of political reaction to the two dominant nationalists. So I I see Cypriotism as more a sort of a consciousness rather than a full-blown ideology. So the consciousness, the Cypriot consciousness, in the term was coined by late Kostis Achniotis. It's this refusal to be subsumed within the one or within the other identity. And in Niyazi's work, this appears as a sort of federalist consciousness, a consciousness that, again, is beyond, is a different term, of course, and it has different connotations, but it is, again, something that is able to move without abolishing Greekness or Turkishness, but being able to go beyond these identities and their political implications.
Can I ask, there's a question that's been here for a while, and I just wanted to entertain it because something crossed my mind. And what crossed my mind was, Niyazi, in the European Parliament, I think you're involved in a group that's working also in Palestine. Is that right?
Yeah.
Because one of the questions that came very early on here, and we haven't addressed, is whether the Cyprus story has any lessons or can provide some kind of blueprint for approaching, or maybe just approaching or resolving the Israeli-Palestinian issue. I wonder what your thoughts are on that as someone who's working in both areas.
No, we have nothing to offer to Palestine for a solution for a Palestinian and Israeli dispute. So, and I wouldn't say we can't be a model for anything. And we don't want a wall within Nicosia. We want a divided country, and we don't want also to compare two-state solution when it comes to Palestine and Israelis and to Cyprus. These are totally different things. But I will maybe come back later. Let me say a few things, because you talk a lot about geopolitics of gas. I would tell you that this is one of the most important things, because it's not a gas drilling for gas policy. It's not an energy policy. It's an ideological geopolitics. It's not even geopolitics. It's not like my neighbors, I do politics for my neighbors. It's an ideological geopolitics that I believe it's already collapsed anyway, in a worse sense, because we power game and power balances in the region would not support such a very big idea of small Cyprus to turn into a kind of power in the region, so that can stand against models of solution or against Turkey. Now, two things are very important for the Greek Cypriots to decide upon it. Now, this gas energy, this geopolitical, ideological geopolitics has collapsed, and also the status quo is not maintainable anymore. Turkey's policy in Varosia shows us very clearly what is expecting us if we don't go for a compromise. I think it even more crucial than 2004 nowadays to take a very big decisions. It's a Cavafian Vangelis dilemma. Either you have a yes or no. And that's the dilemma right now, I believe. So it's very important. Now, to come to the remarks of Constantina, of course, I'm against any kind of nationalism and third nationalism and Cypriotism, and I don't see any potential even in that movement to turn into a nationalism, as Vangelis said. But wherever there is an identity movement, I will quote Zygmunt Bauman, there is a conflict, there is a struggle. So if there is an identity, if an identity is vocal, definitely there is a struggle, there is a conflict, and we have to understand this. Turkish Cypriots are engaging against Turkish domination, and we are trying to protect a kind of Cypriotism. Greek Cypriot, especially new generation, is developing different sensitivities. This, to my mind, may fit very well into federalism and into constitutional patriotism, if I'm going to talk about any civic nationalism, than into a kind of cultural nationalism, which is rather excludes difference. So I'm not afraid so far that this kind of cultural component of identity would lead to a cultural nationalism which would exclude the others. So definitely answer is we don't need a third nationalism. Quite the opposite. We have to go beyond nation into multicultural setup, in constitutional patriotism, and in federalism, which allows us to be different but also united.
Do we have time for one more question, Elsa?
Yes, please. We have a question from Ellie, who's a first year here at Brown. Ellie went to a Cypriot public elementary school in 2000s. And she says that she's seen how Greek Cypriot children of her generation were socialized to see this issue as an us versus them, good versus bad situation. So Ellie, together with a couple of more of our students and alumni, are wondering, what is the role of education in encouraging some critical thinking? What kind of bicommunal education reforms should we see there?
Yeah, I think education has a key role to play, and it is playing a really bad role in Cyprus, especially in the Greek Cypriot community, because in the Turkish Cypriot community there was some reform taking place back in 2004 and being sustained for a decade or so. And the second difference is that in the north, there are progressive trade unions or trade unions, education trade unions led by progressives. And this limits the nationalist effect and the theocratic attempts that the AKEL cultural war, as Niyazi talked before, this attempt to impose Quran reading in schools and so on, all this defense of secularism is taken up by the trade unions in the north, whereas in the south, the education system is under the ideological control of the church, really, and nationalism is very dominant in all levels, from the ministry to the teachers to the headmasters of the schools to the teachers. So it's a very suffocating environment, and of course this does not allow critical thinking, and people who are trying to do critical thinking and to cultivate critical thinking are marginalized, isolated, and sometimes penalized by this system, as we have seen in many occasions. In my book, I refer to the attempt by Christofias' government to do some changes, and the failure to really, some technical changes were made, but on the ideological and the political and the educational even front, as far as the social and the humanities dimension is concerned, and the consequences of that failure 10 years ago, we're suffering from those consequences today.
Well, one word, just one word. We have to rebuild it from zero, from scratch. Reverse education system. I can imagine one of the worst in the world is in Cyprus, which is built upon ethnocentrism of 19th century, otherization, racism. So we have a lot to do. I tell you now, soon we're going to present a study about teaching history in Greek and Turkish Cypriot schools. We completed the study now in my office, and is in Greek and Turkish and English languages. Again, one of the researches we did in the past, nothing has changed, things are even worse and worse. But worse, of course, for me personally, and which I think says everything, is, and is symbolically saying everything. One of the campaigners in 1995, when I was elected at University of Cyprus, to get me out of University of Cyprus today is a Minister of Education of the Republic of Cyprus. So that tells everything, I think.
On that note, I know you have to leave, and I'd like to thank our speakers. I'd like to thank Vangelis for being late for his class, Niyazi for overcoming the challenges of internet and joining us, and for staying longer. And of course, Grigori, thank you so much. We're all looking forward to reading your book carefully. So go out and buy it, everybody. And please join us next week. It is the Greek bicentennial, as you know, and our contribution is a discussion between Maurizio Isabella and Holly Case about revolutions in the global south. So thank you, everybody. Çok merci, Niyazi, and thank you very much. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions. Time has flown.
Okay. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.